Welcome to Afterthoughts, everybody. This is our recommend or refute episode where we're going to go around the circle and each talk about a movie that we watched separately from the group this week and whether we would recommend it or not to the rest of the crew and to you, the listener at home. With me, as always, John Garcia.
Hi, I'm happy to be here. I'm still doing my Serpico impression.
Still right on point, John.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Foreshadowing things to come. And Ryan King.
Hey, how's it going? For those of you keeping score at home, no, I still haven't watched The Iron Claw.
I still, when you do it,
shortlisted.
I'll give you that. I have that foam glove that says the Iron Claw is coming for you.
At some point,
I brought it up. We talked about possibly doing it. I talked to Darla about possibly doing it. So that's like the first step.
There you go. The first step is
One
admitting
step
it.
at a time.
At some point, we're just going to start calling it the Ryan Claw.
Yeah, that's true.
Just flip those letters around. Cool. Well, John, what did you watch this week that you want to share with the group?
Well, the only other thing besides Serpico that I watched is Alex Braverman's 2023 documentary. Thank you very much.
Andy Kaufman is with us tonight, and it's a little difficult to explain what Andy does.
He's a man of many personalities and surprises.
He's one of the stars of the ABC television series Taxi. He is also a professional busboy.
Finalist in the Fonzie Lookalike Contest.
Andy Kaufman is not an easy person to interview.
Okay, look, get out of here. Get out, turn that camera off. Get out of here.
He was like a good boy.
I always believe in being honest.
The boy next door, the boy from the neighborhood.
I always believe in telling the truth.
And then do something so crazy and different that it was that kind of yin-yang that made your head spin.
Mr. Kaufman, okay? Mr. Kaufman, you're just a stagehand. You understand that? Get it through your head, okay? Fine. Don't give me a hard time, pal. You're just a stagehand. Okay.
If you talk to him, there was nothing weird about him.
God knows what he has in store for us now.
All of a sudden in all the papers it said Andy Kaufman went on the dinosaur show and threw eggs at her and was carried off by security guards, but I wasn't there.
Andy Kaufman died for his sins. To honor his memory, commit them.
He asked me to write a my memory of Andy Kaufman. I said, I don't even know him.
Which I did a terrible Andy Kaufman impression doing his Foreign Man. But it is a documentary that came out about Andy Kaufman in full. It's not Jim and Andy. It's not something that is really trying to do anything seizing on pop culture anymore because I feel like Andy Kaufman, he's been dead for well over, 40 something years now.
I thought he wasn't
as
dead.
far as we know, as far as we know, he's dead. We don't actually know.
Tony Clifton's
if he really
not dead, right?
Tony Clifton's still out there. Yeah. Tony Clifton's still out there singing Volare and whatever the fuck else he does, bringing prostitutes into inappropriate situations and all of that. But thank you very much it runs in, it's a tight 99-minute film, a documentary that interviews a lot of the loved ones of Andy Kaufman. Really, it does nothing to talk about Man on the Moon, doesn't talk about Jim and Andy. Jim Carrey is nowhere in it. Thankfully, it is something that is completely devoted to capturing what Andy Kaufman actually fucking did in his life. And I went to see it at AFS. I went with Dixon, who invited me for the Doc Days Film Festival that they were doing.
That was the only Doc Days movie that I made it to this year. I was disappointed I didn't get to see more.
Sorry, you didn't get to see Union. I know you
I know. I was really... The Christian Smalls was in attendance. I was really pumped to see that, but I'm going to have to wait till that's available later. But one of my favorite local festivals, just like really interesting documentaries that they pull in from Sundance and other places that typically have kind of a different structure and approach to your standard documentary.
Yeah. And this is the only, according to the programmer who showed up that day, this is the only biopic documentary that they had in the festival. Mm-hmm. And honestly, it's everything that I wanted in an Andy Kaufman documentary. I gave it on Letterboxd the highest rating possible, 5 stars. And that's just because everything else kind of tries to relay Andy Kaufman in terms of the contemporary culture that we have, or in the context of what Hollywood has rendered with obviously Jim and Andy and Man on the Moon. And this one was way more focused on like, no, like here's everything Andy got up to. Here's a lot of archival footage about it. Let's interview some talking heads that really have as close as possible a glimpse into who Andy really was without giving you any kind of universal assertion on who he is, like his identity.
Like they spent a lot of time with his girlfriend, and it's like there's no reason that anybody would know or care who that was, right? Like most documentaries are going to just focus on famous people that knew him tangentially to like give weight to who he was as a person. And this is like, no, we want to spend time with the people who like really know him the best. Like here's his writing partner and what his thoughts were on him. Here's his girlfriend and how she viewed him. And
they weren't like, here's this stand-up comedian who would tell you time and time again, Andy was a big influence on me or any of that. Like he was really changing the landscape of the comedic world or all of that shit. Like
Danny DeVito was in it, and he was wonderful.
But that's because Danny DeVito worked with him on Taxi and like really understood a little bit, like had personal knowledge of what the fuck Andy was trying to do. Full disclosure, in high school, I went as Latka knowing that Andy hated Latka for Halloween. Like when we all dressed up, nobody who knew who the fuck I was, but I was the fucking mechanic. I was Foreign Man, and I knew well within it and that context that like Andy hated that character. But it was this entry point where I could tell people more about Andy Kaufman and who the fuck he was. And I used that I leveraged that as best I could because I really appreciate what Andy Kaufman does and did for like, not just comedy, but for performance theater, for like art. He didn't give a fuck what people thought about him. He just wanted to elicit a reaction. And I've always been fascinated by that perspective, that you would not give a fuck what anybody thought, what you did, how you did it. You really just wanted to elicit this response from them, to let them experience a different part of themselves or experience something within themselves that they didn't know they were capable of doing. And I thought the documentary was fascinating in how it explored that. There's a lot of postulation about, was it like embarrassment therapy for him? Was it something he really wanted to figure out because of kind of like a really early on betrayal by his parents and sort of the way that they framed some of the more traumatic things that happened to him as a child. And a lot of that never finds, for the entirety of it, it never finds conclusive answers. And I just appreciated that a documentary would let you sit with that information and think about it and not force all of those conclusions on you. I know the last documentary that Dixon, you and I watched at AFS was the A Disturbance in the Forest, the Star Wars holiday special, which tells a much more like rigid story about like a terrible time in Star Wars as a franchise's life cycle.
One of the many.
Yeah, one of the many, which I'd recently discovered are all on Disney Plus. You can watch any of their wonderful shows like the Ewoks animated adventures that are completely fucked.
The holiday special's not though, right?
Yeah, the holiday special is not. Everything else is.
Until George dies.
Yeah, their made-for-TV movies are also on there, which are fucking wild. But yeah, I felt as the documentary respected the audience, and the editing was fucking top tier. I really enjoyed a lot of, there was even points in the editing where they just fucked with you as an audience. They kept like bloopers in, they fucked with people they were interviewing. I enjoyed those aspects of it and found a lot of humor in it, while still telling, you know, the true story of Andy Kaufman and what he went through, and really not trying to shy away from any of what anybody felt about any of it. Everybody wasn't positive about him. People were like, I don't agree with that. I still loved Andy as a person. I don't agree with what he did. Probably the only thing that I don't think was covered in it and has never been really talked about is everybody's fascinated that he came down with, is it single cell carcinoma, the lung cancer that's supposedly very rare in people like him who don't smoke and don't do these other things. But Tony Clifton fucking smoked a shit ton, drank a shit ton, did all these things. Like he introduced carcinogens into his body, whether he liked it or not. And I have to respect everybody for not acknowledging that and keeping like a kayfabe about his different personalities. Right, But Jesus, like that is clearly what sparked a lot of him and what kind of pushed him off the edge to have that cancer. But without Andy Kaufman, we wouldn't have things like Pee-wee's Playhouse. We wouldn't have a lot of the awkward, I would say more awkward comedic tones that we have today. I feel like he influenced things like Eric Andre and all of these other forms of comedy while also bringing a childlike delight to it. And so It was just a great documentary. I fucking loved it.
Joe Pera, you think maybe pulls?
I don't think Joe Pera. Yeah, because Joe Pera has applied. There's now an Andy Kaufman Foundation and like a scholarship that you can get as a comedian, where you can be endorsed for the comedy award. And Joe Pera has applied for it, and every time that he applies, his video is always about how he's not actually applying for it, and it's fucking great. It's great to just watch that. So yeah, I love it.
I didn't know that. That's awesome.
Yeah,
that's funny. Yeah, Joe Pera definitely gets that like uncomfortableness about comedy, but then like he subverts it differently. Like Andy,
sure, yeah.
In some ways, like there were definitely times where Andy's subversion was annoying you for so long and then winning you over.
Yeah.
Right. Or being
just reading The Great Gatsby on stage for 4
I
hours.
love that shit.
Yeah. Or getting to a point and turning around and becoming something that was lovable, even though you thought you couldn't, where Pera is kind of like constantly lovable, and then you think he's not going to be, and then he comes back around to being it again, then it's subverted. So it's even like a one step more complicated of that.
Yeah, Pera somehow bends your politeness to his will, whereas Kaufman uses it against you and really frustrates you.
That's funny. I think one thing that I commented to you, John, when we walked to the movies, I think like a lot of these types of documentaries try to be like, who is Andy Kaufman? Who is this person? And like they had some interviews early on in the film. They had like Gary Shandling, who had like was clearly exasperated, and they just cut to the end of of some interview where he was just like just like sat there silent for 20 seconds, and he was just like, I would just like to know who the real Andy Kaufman is. And they cut away and they never talked to Gary Shandling again, which was great. But I feel like they set you up to think this is going to be some sort of thing about exploring who the real person is behind the mask and blah, blah, blah. And then they just never try to answer that question. And I really liked that about the movie. It's like at some point you have to accept Andy Kaufman for who he has presented himself to be, right? And he told society who he was or who he wanted them to think he was through all of his different bits and characters that he did over the course of his career. And like, you know, at some point we have to accept that like there is some truth into those are aspects of his personality. And, you know, he's not trying to bare his honest soul in front of everybody and and tell you what's actually going on inside of him. He's trying to be an entertainer and to do these different things and to, you know, maybe make you explore something about yourself in the process of engaging with what he's doing. And I appreciated that the movie was just kind of trying to explore that concept and to talk to the people that knew Andy well on what they appreciated about him and how they interacted with him. But they weren't asking, you know, his writing partner to be like, but really, who was Andy in the quiet moments when he was vulnerable at night? You know,
yeah,
it was
like, what did he tell you about his fears and like that shit? Like even up to his cancer diagnosis, they don't talk about a lot of that. They talk about what made him happy, which is like great. I think that gives you some comfort in the like bleakness of the story of his life. But they don't really go out of their way to be like, and then all this other stuff happened where Andy just confessed himself and like who he really was in his cancer diagnosis and all that shit. I will say I watched My Breakfast with Blassie several years ago, and I fucking love that fucking 50-minute thing. It's so absurd and ridiculous, and I've never seen My Dinner with Andre, but I just assume that is the people's version of My Dinner with Andre. Because Andy Kaufman just does such a phenomenal job being fucking weird about how when he brings people in and how he acts like a celebrity and what the fuck he does. I loved it. And the documentary reminded me like, yeah, I want to go back and watch that again. It's good times.
Yeah, he understood the wrestling world.
Yes.
Yes.
Like so well. Yeah,
absolutely. Sure. He knew it better than anything. He's the intergender continental champion. What can I say?
Oh man. Yeah. That's definitely the part of his career where I'm like, yeah, you're taking it a little too far here. That's very uncomfortable to watch. And it's like, it's funny, but it's upsetting at the same time. And it's like, you know what he's commenting on and you know, he's like trying to subvert the narrative of society at the time, just be provocative and outlandish, but it's like also it just feels wrong, to a certain degree.
Yeah.
But.
Well, I will say, Dixon, it would be several years after his death that Sergeant Slaughter would step into the ring with the Iraqian general. I can't remember the fuck his name is. There's some like representative of Iraq or Iran in WWF that would wrestle for the title of some shit. And it was just like, Kaufman was ahead of his time in predicting how absolutely absurd and politically charged something could be.
Their characters get
so I definitely I both understand. Yeah, I totally get like the uncomfortable aspect of what he was doing, but I'm also just like, there were a lot of people then that probably were sitting there and being like, I agree with what he's saying about women and how they can't wrestle men. And those people should actively be the ones that look in a mirror and are like, what the fuck is wrong with me? And that's what makes it funnier when Jerry Lawler fucking put him in a pile driver.
Oh, yeah. And that video where he's taunting Lawler and he's like wrestling a woman that's bigger than Jerry Lawler.
Yeah. Oh, my God. And they bring him like somebody and he's like, they bring him Bob Zamuda, and Bob Zamuda's like, Andy, she's not responding. And he's like, whatever, she's probably poor. Like, Jesus Christ. Just like that shit. He very much was like the proto Ric Flair, other kind of wrestlers. It's wild to watch that.
Yeah.
Anyways, I would recommend Thank You Very Much. It's a great documentary.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I recommend it, and I think that it'd make for a great triple feature with Man on the Moon and Jim and Andy. I think that it's a holistic package of Kaufman.
And you mentioned liking that Jim Carrey was in it. I think I agree with you. But I also love Jim and Andy. It's just such a good movie.
Oh, yeah.
I'm glad that they're not like that movie isn't leaking into this one.
Yes.
They can stand alone as separate things.
Absolutely. And you can see two different comedians' journeys into the world of Andy Kaufman, which is kind of wild.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, Ryan, what do you got for us?
Yeah, I actually got out to the movie theater with my family.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I saw the Iron Claw. Weekend. Oh wait, no, wait.
At the Dollar Theater.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Ryan Claw.
Actually, it did end up being a bit of a pain in the ass to get to, but we went to see Spy X Family: Code White.
For their first family vacation, the Forgers travel to the snow-covered land of Frejus.
Careful wandering off. We don't want you getting lost.
It's a special night, so I think it's okay for Anya to stay up past her bedtime.
That trip?
You must retrieve the microfilm without fail.
Ended up holding the fate of the world.
This will lead to war between East and West.
What a nosy little girl. Kill her!
Don't tell me Anya's gotten herself mixed up with the military.
Fire! War's coming anyway!
No matter what, we can't give up now! If that microfilm ends up in the wrong hands, it could alter the fate of the world.
Uh-oh! I'm in big trouble!
Let's do this as a family.
Is that all you've got? Eliminate them!
These 10! I'm gonna save them!
Spy Family: Code White.
I'll get them back, whatever it takes.
I'm sorry?
Which is
Code Wipe?
Yeah.
Is that the new Spy Kids movie? Is it like Spy
Robert
Kids
Redford
5?
Yeah, it's the 18th Spy Kids movie, where Danny Trejo is all of the kids.
I would watch the hell out of that.
Yeah, that would be so great if they deepfake Danny Trejo onto everybody.
Yeah. So Spy X Family it's been I think still running in Shonen Jump manga and has 2 seasons of an anime, which I actually think are on Hulu because we live in a weird time. And those movies are getting released to the theater. And this is one of the movies for an anime where it like takes place in a way that it doesn't like affect anything and also not necessarily require you to know anything. Like it could kind of fit anywhere in the timeline, so to speak.
Okay.
Annoyingly, like every theater that's showing it around me only has like 30 seats, and several of them were like completely booked or whatever. So I had to drive like to the other side of Los Angeles to be able to see it. So I thought it wasn't going to work out.
How much time in the car are we talking here to make it to this theater?
Enough to watch the Iron Claw.
It would have. Oh yeah, easily I could watch that. It was an hour, and then we fucked around at the mall over there because we'd never been to that part of the town. It was an hour to get back, so it was pretty much like a whole day became just.
So you're going like from Dallas to Fort Worth.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So this was in like Santa Anita, so it was like still in LA, but it's like on the northern part on the opposite side of where we are.
LA is a bunch of tiny cities in a trench coat. So.
Yeah, it's just like a bunch of exactly. But my family have watched both seasons of the show. This is one of the really good like gateway animes. Like it's probably something I would almost recommend to anyone, especially people with families. Your kids don't have to be too old to watch it. There's definitely like spy and assassin, like the main characters. That's not about that per se, but there's that thematically. So there's, people die.
Yeah.
And if your kids are okay with somebody kind of like clearly being stabbed and then dying off screen, then you're fine. Spy X Family's fine for you.
Yeah.
The basic plot of the show, the movie does a good job of kind of just jamming it down your throat at the beginning. In case you have absolutely no clue and someone drag you to the theater to watch this. The titular Spy X Family is a fake family.
Okay. It's like a Mr. and Mrs. Smith.
Yes, there's a character who he is the world's best spy, and I mean even more than in a James Bond. Like he can absolutely do anything. He can like transform who he looks like and what his voice sounds like in like 5 seconds to pretend to be someone else, and he's like physically capable of anything and can talk in code and you can't tell and read lips from 1,000 miles away, like anything the plot needs it to be. He is like the world's best spy. And there are 2 separate countries, essentially like very much like a Berlin Wall kind of situation where, they both lie about what's going on the other side. It's hard to tell which country is the good country or bad country. He is spying to try to keep another war from breaking out, and he's trying to get as close as possible to this important person in the party, because they have like, a political party a la Death of Stalin. Yeah. He's trying to get close to that person to find out what his plans are, what he's doing with the war. But this guy's like so absolutely doesn't go out into society, recluse. The only way you can get to see him is because he goes to some of the school functions at his absolute private elite school for kids. And so he has to create a family because this school is so elite. You can't just have your kid come in. They need to have a mom and a dad, or they would throw you out and think it was strange. And so
discrimination. There's no anti-discrimination
orphans
laws.
are not allowed to attend this school.
Yeah, they can't have orphans. Yeah,
they can go to public.
Worst
school.
thing about orphans is that they don't have parents.
Yeah. So he ends up adopting a girl, and they make a cover for it as if it's his former wife has passed away, and this is his daughter from that marriage. Unbeknownst to him, she's a telepath.
All right, let's just throw that in.
And she actually used that to like read his mind while he was coming to pick up kids at the orphanage to find out like exactly what he wanted so she could get out of the orphanage. And so she's like lied about her age and lied that she could read.
She's like a Dominican baseball player.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, exactly. So she's a year younger than all the other kids in the school. Literally, yeah, you're right.
Miguel Tejada.
She thinks it's cool that he's a spy, so that's why she like goes along with it, but doesn't want anyone to find out because she thinks she'll be experimented on or taken away or whatever. He ends up finding a woman. She is the world's best assassin secretly, and she's like offing people for the government whenever she's called to. But she has to like pretend to be a normal person because they have like a secret police, right, that are constantly down everyone's throat. And so she's starting to get suspicious because she doesn't go on dates with people. She has time off from work that's strange. And so he asks her, not knowing that she's an assassin, to join this fake family. And she agrees to because it'll help be a cover for her as an assassin, not knowing he's a spy. So no one fucking knows anything about anyone else in this situation. They're all kind of using it as a cover. Except the telepath, because she can read both of their minds.
Amazing.
And then eventually they get a dog who was experimented on and can see the future.
Sure, why not? Fuck it. We're just all in for penny and
again,
for pound.
yeah.
Wait, what can the dog do with that information?
He doesn't seem to be able to control it very well.
Does he
it just
even
sort
know
of,
it's the future?
Shines to him.
Does he like rough the shine to his people?
So
what's
because
that, Lassie?
the daughter,
the future fell down a well.
You're talking about Scatman Carruthers.
Because the daughter's a telepath, she can sometimes see what he sees, and so she'll be able to get it. But sometimes he just has to like try to like make it happen. And in fact, like the whole show is mainly a comedy. In one episode, he sees into the future because the assassin, the spy is out late, and so the mom, who's the assassin, is staying home, and she's like, "Well, I'll make dinner," and he sees into the future that it's going to kill him if he eats it because she doesn't know how to cook.
Okay.
And so
she's so
he
good
suddenly
at
starts
assassinating
freaking out.
people that she just does it by accident through normal
Yes,
activities.
yes, yeah. He sees into the future and he's like, I have to prevent this. So he like finds a way to break out of the house and run to go help the spy finish his mission so he can get home early so he can cook so the dog can eat and not die.
Amazing.
So yeah, it really is like funny off plots like that. And like the whole family, like we've watched this. It's very funny, I think, for really anyone could watch it and enjoy it because the plots are kind of like this silly thing and finding out. And the most of the driving plot is the daughter is trying to move up in the school because they have these like stars that if you're an extra, special student, you get a bonus merit. And once you get up to a certain number, you're in this like special society, I guess the skulls or whatever.
Skull and Bones.
Yeah, the Skull of Bones. And then they'll be able to get close to this guy. And so even though she's like, honestly, a little too stupid for the school, she's having to like telepath her way through it. And the spy is trying to like steal the homework. And like, there's always this shit they're trying to figure out. And so the plot of this movie is there's a chance that she could win a star at this cooking competition that's coming up. And so by his spy intelligence, he knows that the person who is going to grade it has a recipe like from when he was a kid that nobody knows really how to cook anymore, except this one person in a small town that was the town that this guy grew up in. So they're going to go there and have that dessert so that they can come back and cook it and they'll win the star because
they're going to ratatouille somebody? Jesus.
Yeah, they're going to ratatouille him. Yes.
All right.
And so, like, that's sort of the, like, kind of their plot in order to, like, get them into a bunch of shenanigans, right? Which is, on the train ride over, the daughter accidentally eats a chocolate that has a spy microfilm hidden in it. And the government...
It's a very microfilm.
Yeah, Jesus.
Yes, very, very microfilm. The government is trying to get that microfilm, and if they get a hold of it, they're going to use it and attack the other country. And so they're trying to chase and find her in town and get her to shit it out. Like, that is actually a plot line.
Turns out that's the only way that governments store their secret information is on microfilm.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, teeny tiny microfilm.
Every single spy movie from the 60s and 70s is like all about microfilm. And like, what even is that? I don't know. It's just
they make a pretty
storage
poor
device.
decision of like, we'll hide it inside a chocolate and not think that that's going to like,
nobody should eat that.
No one will think to look here. And then so like that's kind of like our plot, like our excuse to get out of home and then out here, and then that gets the daughter kidnapped, and then the spy and the assassin have to go save her while not tipping off anyone that they're a spy or an assassin. And by like ultimate assassin, I probably didn't mention, this woman is like the strongest thing on earth because this is like anime level strength. So she can just like, she can punch somebody to tomorrow easily or like pick up a car if she needs to. And she doesn't even like realize her own strength kind of thing, which also leads to shenanigans.
Sure.
So,
it sounds absurd. This whole thing sounds like a fun, absurd time.
It is a fun, absurd time. And I'll say as this movie, it fits very well. Like it could be an episode, a much longer episode of the show. Like it was well done. It's funny. We all enjoyed it. There's definitely parts that are memorable, which works well for something that's like sort of out of the timeline to actually still have something that you'll remember. Because it essentially like crunches out who everyone is in the first, 5-10 minutes of the movie. you can go to it having absolutely no knowledge of the show, and you'll pick it up quick enough. It just does the like, here's a spy mission, and you see the guy's a spy. Here's an assassin mission, you see the assassin.
Yep.
Then we tell you in the voiceover the girl's a telepath, and then you're off to the races.
Oh, okay. Well, cool. Anime movies always just bewilder me with how much you have to either have context for it, or they're just like, yeah, just fuck it, just go with whatever the fuck this is. I'm always like just wild. It's just wild to me that you can get away with telling in any context that isn't the Cowboy Bebop movie, which we've talked about, that you can just be like, here are these fucking characters. They're in the middle of all this other shit. Just fuck all that. Let's just do a random side.
We're going to go somewhere else now.
Yeah, we're going to do some other shit.
Yeah.
Like I want an anime movie that commits, God damn it. Tell me a story that I don't know anything about. I dare you.
Yeah. The recent Dragon Ball movies are for you, sir.
Oh, thank you. I will do that.
Yeah, I would say the last few Dragon Ball movies don't give a fuck because they don't have time to possibly explain to you fucking 35 years of complicated history.
That reminds me, there's a video game called There's No Time to Explain, where every level is a dude busting in and going, there's no time to explain. Just fucking follow me. And then you have to figure out the puzzle for the fucking room. It's great. And that's what I want movies to be like.
Yeah, the Dragon Ball movies, like back for Dragon Ball Z, did try to like somewhat be encapsulated or try to explain to you. But these last few, since Dragon Ball Super started, like have just been like, look, there's too much shit going on. Like there's alternate universes and giant Dragon Balls, and people have been dead 2 or 3 times, or they change colors. Like, fucking don't worry about it. Like, just want to see them punch, they're gonna punch.
Take a note from Serpico. It gave me all the context I needed.
It's on a borderline.
Yeah, it's on the borderline. Exactly.
Call me Paco.
Why? His name is Serpico with an I, not Paco with an A. I don't
whatever.
know.
Yeah,
but
sure, fuck it.
Yeah, right. This sounds like kind of a zany animated sitcom a la Family Guy, but probably more interesting than that. Is that kind of the vibe that this puts off, and maybe the mentality with which to approach it? Like, you know, you're just gonna see some crazy shit. Don't ask questions, just laugh and let it take you on a ride.
Yeah, it's definitely like you're here for the situation and to laugh at it. The plot like slowly moves forward, right? So this isn't like sitcom-y where it constantly resets. Like there are repercussions for things every so often, just enough to like move things along a little bit to keep working towards our plot and not forget about it. But it is sort of this like, okay, how are they going to get out of this one? Right, is kind of constantly which is the situation you get into. And it can be something that, like is trivial, like the dog seeing that he's going to die in the future, and they spend an episode like of him trying to figure that out and get around that, and it's just like funny. But then there are other ones where it's like they are trying to get into the school, and like she has to take the exams to get into the school. They have to go like present themselves as a family, and there's an interview, and like it amps up as like the crazy shit happens of like. And they purposely like set up mud puddles so people might step in them because then they're not elegant enough if they're muddy to come into our school. Like they stepped in the mud, right? But and then it's like
landmines. For
some random reason though, animals get loose, and so then everyone is like bumped out of the way and falling into the mud. But then like our heroes are able to stop because the assassin can just like knock a bull fucking out of the way. They stop the rampaging animals, but of course they're covered in mud. But they brought backup clothes because the spy knew something like this might happen, right? So it's that kind of like, okay,
that is,
and you know, you kind of get into it, and it's like, but then they get dirty again, but they brought 2 pairs of clothes.
That's the fucking like Zucker Brothers zaniest shit I've ever heard. And
exactly.
Okay, that makes
sense.
Yeah,
it's definitely like the zany level, like hijinks.
Fair enough. That's fucking great. I like something that is self-aware and knows to fucking play with its audience and have a good time. So sounds interesting.
Cool. Yeah, sounds like a good time. Cool. Yeah, I'll try to be on the lookout for that. Is it still in theaters? You know, I mean, I guess once this posts, it probably won't be, but it seems
probably
like kind of a small
not by the time
release.
It posts. Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe like this weekend's probably like the last one, and it already was like dropping. It was like
Pretty
1 or 2
small.
showtimes.
It was like the theaters were hard to get into anyway.
Yeah, it was like 2 showtimes at Santa Monica, 2 showtimes at Burbank. Like that was what it was down to.
Gotcha. Yeah. Well, I watched a movie this week, a Japanese horror film from 1968 called Kuroneko.
侍を殺しその生き血をすることが私たちの悲願です。そのために天地の魔人に願をかけたのです。あれが侍でなかったらの。
おまたしき妖怪、我が母我が夢に姿を変えるとは何もしわらぞ。
Written and directed by Kaneto Shindo. I have now seen 2 of his films, and I'm really enjoying his work as a director. I've seen Onibaba from 1964, and now Kuroneko from 1968. Shindo is a fascinating director. He's like very highly stylized in what he's doing, and both of the films that I've seen of his are just exquisitely shot, just beautiful to look at. Kuroneko is shot in black and white. It's a period piece set in the samurai era of Japan. Unclear like exactly what year it's supposed to take place, but the film opens with this absolutely chilling scene of like realistic horror of this small little house with a thatch roof, and these 2 women are working inside, and all of a sudden this like horde of samurai starts to creep out of the forest and toward the house, and then they kind of just very coldly go into the house, steal all the shit, eat all the food, rape and kill the women, set the house on fire, and then recede back into the forest from whence they came. Then the movie takes a hard pivot from realistic horror to creepy ghost story, where these women end up kind of reappearing in the shadows of their former home, and they act as ghosts that are luring random samurai that cross their paths into their house so that they can seduce them and then rip their throats out and murder them. And it's a really wild story, and the first act is just absolutely gripping. There's a lot of montage of it's a mother and daughter-in-law who have lost their the son/husband in that relationship, who has been kidnapped by samurai previously. He was to join their civil war. He was no longer there, and then they were taken advantage of and murdered by a random horde of samurai that came along. So they are now basically taking out their vengeance on any samurai that happens to be wandering by in the area. And it's shot just so beautifully. Almost the whole movie takes place at night. It's got this really cool expressionistic lighting where like there's these scenes in the deep forest that are incredibly dark, but then there's like a spotlight shining in from the side. It has almost the feel of like a German expressionist film, like a Caligari or a Nosferatu, or an American film noir like a Double Indemnity with like the light coming through the blinds kind of a thing. But outdoor in a forest at night, the lighting feels very unnatural, but it's very apropos for the vibe and what they're trying to do. And the women are shot in this way where like they look very ghostly. They're all dressed in white kind of flowing clothes, and you're not really sure if they're real or if they're not, or what you're looking at. They use a lot of wire work, which apparently was very common in kabuki theater in Japan. And this was kind of one of the first times that it had been translated into film in Japan. And so there are these incredible shots of like a samurai riding a horse in a black background at night, and like a ghost woman like flipping over top of him unseen as he is riding down the road. But it's just like a really interesting vibe, fascinating to watch. Every scene looks absolutely incredible. Essentially as the plot develops, samurai start to disappear, and there are myths that start in the surrounding area that there are these ghosts or potentially beasts who are murdering samurai in the area. And the local like samurai lord of whatever like civil war faction is in that area has to take it upon himself to rid the area of the threat, because he's showing as weak in society because he's losing samurai. And so he assigns a brave samurai who is the only survivor of this massive battle, and they have this enemy known as the bear, who's this massive hairy samurai, and he has cut off the bear's head and brings it back to the leader, and it's like, hey, I did this. I'm the only survivor of these like thousands of people in this battle. I killed the bear. Here's his head. And the guy's like, cool. Do you want to find these like weird ghosts or beasts or whatever that are killing my samurai? He like gives him this shit job. He's like, yeah, you're like a peasant that we recruited. Like, just go and try to tackle this thing. So it's kind of like, I can't really say too much more without giving things away, but essentially, there's this guy who's trying to figure out what's happening. There's these hot women in the forest who are kind of trying to lure him into this scenario.
No.
And it starts out as a horror movie, and it kind of delves into a, sexual thriller / family drama. And I think Shindo is a really interesting filmmaker, and in both of his movies that I've seen, they're about a daughter and a mother-in-law and a daughter, and a man who enters into the picture, and how that kind of upsets the relationship, and both about like poor women in society dealing with samurai coming around them, and kind of the class dynamics there. Shindo is very interested in class, and that's something that he talks a lot about in his movies, and he uses samurai films to kind of discuss that. And one of the things that Shindo tends to do is like every single movie that he makes about samurai, they're all like shit heels that just are out to, get what they can, just selfish assholes that are not honorable in any way. And like almost every other Japanese director who has worked in the samurai genre at some point, there's at least one movie that they've made that is casting the samurai in a positive light. And Shindo is like, no, they're always evil assholes and just, kind of out to fuck over society and take whatever they can. So it's a really interesting movie. There's just so many dynamics at play, and it's saying a lot of different things. And the vibe just changes so much from like realistic horror to folk ghost horror to a sexual thriller family drama thing. Like it's doing a lot of things. The movie evolves over the course of it and has a lot of different things to say. And I thought it was a pretty fascinating experience to watch. So would highly recommend that people check it out.
Yeah. I mean, that sounds fascinating, especially given we've talked about harakiri and sort of like honor culture and the myth of samurai, like how truly noble they might have been.
They're just cops, right? The cops or soldiers or
a Japanese Serpico.
Yeah, they are. I was going to say, not only are they cops, their jobs was to take money and to enforce the money going up to so they literally were Serpico cops.
There you go. I do want to see this. It sounds really fascinating. Both as kind of like the blend of sort of horror and commentary within it, and that's like that reflection on sort of a nationalistic icon. I'm fascinated by it.
Yeah, if you've seen Onibaba or Ugetsu, it's kind of similar to those types of stories where you're blending horror and ghost stories with like the plight of the peasant in Japan and what they're going through. And it's one of the best shot films that I've ever seen. It's just really great to look at. Like we talked about Hour of the Wolf on this podcast. Like it's like close to that level of just impeccable cinematography, and like nighttime black and white cinematography just like pops off the screen. It looks really good.
Nice. Are his other films black and white or?
Onibaba is black and white. There's only two I've seen. I know his other like really famous one called The Naked Island. That's from 1960. That's a little bit earlier. That's also black and white. That one is like a no dialogue movie just about some peasant farmers, and it just follows them and what they're doing. Nice. So yeah, I mean, it's the three that I've seen, the two that I've seen, both from the 60s are black and white. I think he lived a really long life and ended up making movies like well into his 80s, and it ended up making color films. But the two that I've seen were just like absolutely stunning black and white cinematography, and both mostly at night. Also, I have the Criterion Blu-ray. The Criterion cover, you can't tell this if you look online, but in person, like there's like a picture of one of the women on the cover, and like when you like turn it in the light, she'll like disappear and reappear.
Oh, it's fucking rad.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Sick.
Yeah.
Holy shit. Cool.
So that's all I have. So I think we have 3 recommends this week. We have a recommend for Thank You Very Much.
That's right.
A recommend for Spy Family X colon Code White.
Code White.
Spy X Family colon Code White.
Code White.
All right, that thing. The latest in the Fast and Furious franchise. And then we have a recommend for Kuroneko. Cool. So that concludes our recommend or refute episode. I have been your host, Michael Dixon. With us, as always,
Ryan King. If something white is coming out of your family's colon, you need to see a doctor.
Oh yeah, for sure. Jesus.
Yeah, that sounds pretty fucking terrifying. Also,
John Garcia, thank you very much. Hey there, movie buffs, TV toughs, and all listeners in between. John here from the Afterthoughts podcast. I just wanted to drop in at the end of this episode and say thanks for listening. If you've got afterthoughts of your own to share, hit us up. You can find us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at The Afterpod, or jump into a conversation on our Discord server. You can find info for this and more at theafterpod.transistor.fm. Thanks again for listening, and we'll catch you on the next episode. I'm doing like the fucking Jackie Chan foreign man impression from Family Guy when they do a taxi gag. And I'm like not intentionally trying to do that. But they're just like...
Oh, but you meet such colorful characters in taxis, like Alex Rieger and Tony, and that funny foreign guy who worked in a garage.
Rieger, cab 402. Nardo, you and your luscious melons are in 315. Now get the hell out of here, you losers.
Hey, Louie, what about the foreign guy?
No way, Banter. He's a nut job.
Come on, Louie. Show a little compassion for once in your miserable life.
All right, Can of Waterworks. Jackie Chan, cab 302.
Thank you very much.
I want to try for a good Latka. Now I want to go for it. I want to try to do a Latka that isn't the fucking Jackie Chan Latka.
All right.
Hold on. I gotta get into character here. Thank you very much. Ah, fuck. It's still off. It's still off by a little bit.
I think it was better.
I can feel it's getting better, but it very much is not like thank you very much. There's like a
I feel like
a
it's
certain
still
lightness
high at
to
the
it.
end.
There's a very high.
Like you're kind of dropping on the much. I feel like it's like
It
thank
still
you very
goes.
much.
Yeah,
It's
it goes like
he
that.
goes, like, keeps
It
going
is
up.
very much. Thank you very much. It's like my wife and the traffic. It was so terrible. Take my wife, please. I tried. Okay, I tried. At some point I had it nailed, and I did a Halloween costume with it, and I didn't do Jackie Chan Family Guy voice, but.